Hi, and welcome to the inaugural edition of Explorer Live, AAPG's new online magazine. Through Explorer Live, we're looking to connect you with AAPG's leaders, to feature some of the highlights from each monthly issue of the Explorer, and to connect with you, our members. Welcome to this inaugural edition. Now, when you open the cover of the Explorer, the first thing you see is the President's column, and joining me today to kick off this issue of Explorer Live is AAPG President Rick Fritz. Rick, welcome to the program.
Hi, David, and hello to all of you. This is an exciting time, an exciting new program for us to reach members. You know, communication is very, very important for AAPG, and in this time of isolation and everything virtual, it's sometimes we start losing our connections. The only reason we can do the Zoom meetings that we do now is that we have these previous connections. So it's time to reconnect and to build new relationships. And so that's really the purpose of this. And so what a better vehicle to do this than the Explorer. So, I mean, we've worked a lot of improvements this year. And I mean, the last 2 or 3 issues, I hope you've seen this. I encourage you to read it. And I mean, I'm looking at this issue alone, and it talks about North Sea super basins, new play in the Mississippi Canyon. Could Anwar be open to exploration, evaluating fault seals with 3D seismic? The AAPG Women's Network has a nice article about the need for role models in geoscience for women and minorities, and especially how that relates to STEM, which is so important. And then a personal interest, Marvin Davis was my dad. What a great human interest story. I encourage you all to read that. And then Dave Cook on Mars. I mean, that he's featured in this first Explorer Live. And I mean, look at the picture of, if you can see it there, a birth with Delta on Mars. I mean, how exciting is that? So we want to thank you for joining us on this first Explorer Live, but also thank our advertisers for making the Explorer possible.
Absolutely. And Rick, you know, speaking of connection, the Explorer Live was actually one of your initiatives as president. And in your column each month, you've been talking about some of the issues that AAPG is facing as we look to the future. Obviously, this is interesting times. And this month's column was the third in a series of features that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right, David. So, you know, there's 3 things that really run a business or a society, 3 kind of concepts. The first one really is you need to understand what you're best at. And we are really best at discovery. We are best at science and disseminated science. So that's in this last APG ACE 2020 just showed that. What a great collection of papers and posters. And then the second thing is the engine, the financial engine that runs the business. And right now, our financial engine is on just a few pistons, because it's we can't meet face to face, and that's where we had a lot of our income from to do a lot of our other programs. So we're trying to restart that engine right now. And the third thing is, what are you most passionate about? And that's real important. And what we're most passionate about is our members and our profession and all these relationships that we have and the programs around them, like a IBA program or visiting geologist. And so that's the focus of my column this time.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, like you say, as a professional association, membership is really at the core of who we are. And so as you're looking to, you know, we have people phasing out of the industry. We have people coming into the industry, wanting to come into the industry. What's AAPG's strategy regarding membership?
Well, keep in mind that AAPG is a globally diverse society. I mean, you have to really understand that we are globally diverse. And most of our members are really are still working in oil and gas for the most part, and they are, you know, they are focused, and they want us to deepen that part of it, where we expand around all the concepts, all the disciplines around oil and gas, you know, like geoanalytics. And so that's the first thing. I mean, the second is there are a number of members looking at sustainability, sustainable energy, and the transition, so to say. And so the reality is going to be somewhere in between, but really an integration of the two. I mean, the facts are that the future exploration and exploitation have to combine the two. You have to be able to get the product out of the ground for the least cost and for the smallest footprint and for the lowest emissions and the lowest impact on society. So those are things that, that it's the strategy in the future will be an integration of those two. But as I said, membership's really a lot about jobs, of course. The members need jobs, they want jobs. We have a new program called Members in Transition that we are using to try to help people find jobs that are without a work right now. But the reality is oil and gas will still drive most of the jobs because it has the density. But it's going to take a component of sustainability to bring in the talent and the investment into the industry. So that's for AAPG, that's important to understand. There will be, I mean, in addition, there will be jobs in carbon capture and in geothermal. I mean, there's work being done on using old fields and bringing up brines for geothermal, and there'll slowly be alternative energy jobs and things like rare earth metals and so on, and those will. But a lot of companies are starting to repurpose their geoscientists for some of these sustainability jobs.
No, that's very interesting, and I think one of the things that as you as president and chairing the executive committee look at AAPG's future, we've been around for over 100 years now. What do you see looking out into the future? Well,
the future is, of course, what I just mentioned. I think the key is integration, but it's also we have to look at our people. We have a lot of senior members that have made huge contributions to our profession, to our society. In fact, over 65% of our membership are age 45. So we need to make sure that as they retire, we provide opportunities for them to stay engaged, and that's an important part of this. But also, there's a lot about making sure we are more diverse. That we understand equality, that we are inclusive, and so there's a lot of young men and women out there and minorities that are making tremendous contributions to our profession and to society. And as APG and looking to the future, we need to make sure we make room for everybody.
Rick, appreciate you being with us here for the inaugural edition of Explore Live. We'll see you next month.
Thanks, David.
Another of the stories that we have in this month's Explore is a little bit different, but it's also a real impressive, and it deals with AAPG's Women Network. You may have seen the story, representation and retention matters, #female geologists. And what it is a look at the efforts that are being made to first address the place that women have in today's profession, but also to shine a spotlight on the women who are actually making a difference and doing things that are kind of sensational and fantastic. And the word is getting out because of the Women's Network media director, Amanda Pascali, who is our guest today to talk to us a little bit about this whole initiative and what's been going on. Amanda, hi, how are you?
Hi, Vern. I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm doing okay. Now, just to let people know, you're a recent graduate of the University of Houston. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I graduated in May. My classes went completely online in March, so the spring break got extended, and then I just never went back. I didn't know that I wasn't going to ever be able to go back. And then I graduated in May. I mean, that I logged off on the computer, and that was my graduation ceremony. And yeah, here we are. And then shortly after that, I became the publicity director for the AAPG Women's Network.
And I know you've been very busy at that point and doing that. Could you tell us a little bit about how and why you decided to study geology? How you wanted to, what drew you to this profession?
Well, when I was little, as the daughter of two immigrants, I remember one year, I think it was for Christmas, I got as a present this big atlas book. And my favorite thing to do as a little girl was to open the book and close my eyes, just open it to a random page and try to put my finger on a place and say, I want to go there. I wish I could go there. That I don't know where this place is. I don't know what the people are like who live here, but one day I want to explore that place. And I loved to look at the world map and look at, this is where mom is from. This is where dad is from. Two different continents, two different countries, and then join my fingers in New York City, where they met and where I was born. And I loved to look at the top of the map and the bottom of the map, the isolated corners, and say, one day I'm going to go to those places in the only way I know possible, which is to become a geologist.
Oh gosh. When you were, okay, so let me ask you even more specifically. When you were growing up, did you have role models or anybody that you were looking up to, any person that you thought would be, yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, I think primarily my mom. So my mom is an engineer, and I remember even almost being upset with her when I was little because I went to a school where I think I would say it's in a pretty affluent neighborhood, and so most of the other kids at school had only one parent working, which was the father, and so after school every day, all the moms would come and pick up their kids, and my mom wouldn't come because she was at work, and my dad was at work too. They're both immigrants that had nothing, they came from nothing, so they had to work their way up to provide a good life for me. And so usually my grandma would come pick me up, my grandma with her broken English, and she would come pick me up, and I was so embarrassed because I was different than the other kids. And it took me a while, when I grew up and I realized my mom was going to work for me. She was going to work so that way I could have a better life. And I consider her the biggest role model in my life because I realize it now that I'm in my womanhood, that to go to work as a woman, for 10 to 12 hours a day and then come back and cook dinner for this big family that you have, it's I can't imagine being so exhausted, but she always like persevered, and she was my biggest role model.
That may explain your work ethic, which is considerable because you have your fingers in many pies all over the place doing so many extraordinary things. One of the cool things though, and the reason why you were kind of featured in the Explorer this month, is because you're bringing the story of other women to life and women in the profession. How is that, what is that process like? How do you figure out who you want to write about? How do you find them? How do you treat that then? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the first feature that we had was one of our officers from the women's network. And so I interviewed her, and she was kind of a global citizen. Um, and so I was like, wow, what a fascinating story. This woman that, she comes from Latin America, but she's worked in France, and then she's worked in the United States. And Stephanie is the same. Stephanie, one of our other officers, which is, she's kind of a global citizen, and that she's worked all over the world. And there are just so many women out there with incredible stories, but there's this lack of visibility. And I think that that's the real problem, is that there are women in geoscience and in STEM. It's just that we don't have this lack of visibility, even in pop culture. And for me growing up, it's like I loved the Indiana Jones movies and any movies that had like an explorer type person or scientist type person, but very rarely was that person someone who looked like me. And so really what we aim to do with the hashtag Female Geologist initiative is to show, especially young girls, that this is what a scientist looks like. So when you picture a scientist in your head, you should picture someone who looks like Stephanie or Andrea or someone else in our women's network, because this is what the future looks like. The future is female.
For people who want to read these stories and get deeper into all of it, where should we go? Where should we be looking?
Well, we have I started an Instagram profile for our organization because I know that many young people are on Instagram these days. So the stories are there on Instagram. They're also on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter. Just if you look for the AAPG Women's Network on any of those platforms, you will find those stories.
And you've been having a lot of success, I understand. The analytics of interest in the stories has really been growing, and interest in Women's Network, right?
Yeah, well, it's not a surprise. People like stories, and people like knowing other people and meeting other people, especially today when we can't really go outside and meet people and know people. To be scrolling through your feed and just see a photo of this incredible woman in front of this, incredible rock formation, and to read her story and know where she comes from and her background, it's intriguing, I think, for anyone, women, but also men, I think.
Yeah, I think very much so. Before we go, speaking of intriguing people, so in addition to having a love of geology, which you do, and a passion to share those stories, you obviously have a passion for communicating because you're writing, and you have a certain knack for being part of the social media world, which is very exciting at this time in history. And you've got this music thing going. You like to do music, right?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
kind of a duality.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
singer-songwriter and also a geoscientist.
So we have to ask, because some of us have seen it on YouTube, a cool song that you do with, oh, forgive me, from the University of Houston, another professor there.
Yes, Dr. Peter Copeland.
Yes, go and the song is not "I've Been Everywhere," but "I've Seen Every Rock." Okay,
Mhm.
tell us about how that song came.
So, I think that the original is by Jeff Makoff, if I remember his name correctly. I don't know. But then I think the most popular version of the song is by Johnny Cash, "I've Been
Yeah,
Everywhere,"
that's
or at
right.
least that's the version that I've heard growing up.
Same here.
Um,
Same here.
yeah, and so Dr. Copeland, I took a class with him, I think my sophomore year of college. I wasn't even declared as a geology major when I took my first class with him. But he always struck me as this kind of like interesting character. And I remember one year at one of our department events, he read a poem that he wrote for all the students who were graduating that particular year. And I was just like, what a goofy, like fun guy. And so I would always go to his office to just pour my feelings out to him. Oh, I failed this test. I feel so bad. Like, I don't believe I can become a geoscientist. And he'd be like, Amanda, shut up. You're talented. And when I graduated, he contacted me. He said, I have this idea for a song. Would you do it with me? And I was like, okay. And so we got together and we filmed it. And yeah, then now it's on YouTube with thousands of views, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So can you give us just, and you don't have to sing it, or if you want to sing, you can.
Mm.
No. Just what some of the lyrics or something, so some people get the idea of what this song's like.
So basically, it's us naming a bunch of rocks back to back to back really quickly. If you know the "I've Been Everywhere" song, you know that there's names of places that are back to back very quickly in that song, naming everywhere that he's been. But with "I've Seen Every Rock," we name a bunch of rock types. And the song opens with me and Dr. Copeland, and he's saying, well, I was taking strike and dip on the dusty Winnemucca Fault when along came a geologist, which is me. And then I start singing, and it's kind of this back and forth. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it.
Okay, you're very modest at this moment, but everybody can see it on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Just go to look up Amanda Pascali. I've Seen Every Rock. You won't be sorry. Of course, Amanda, you know someday you're going to have to sing it for us. You know that.
Maybe in person one day.
Right. Well, we can't wait for those times to come too. Amanda, thank you. And by the way, right now, everybody, you can connect with Amanda through social media. Follow the Women's Network, APG Women's Network, and all the other platforms. There's great stories being told about women who are doing great things and fun things and interesting things in the profession. And Amanda is the one bringing the stories to us, and we thank you for that, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Vern.
Okay, see you later. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Vern Stefanic with AAPG, and it is my privilege to have a conversation today with the first featured guest of the inaugural Explorer Live. Today, we're talking with Doug Cook. Doug Cook, for 34 years, was a petroleum geologist, now retired, but is still very, very, very active in EMD and all things that have to do with astrogeology. And he wrote an amazing story for the current issue of the Explorer that's headlined Mars Resources for Human Settlement. Provocative, very informative too. Doug, welcome to Explorer Live.
Thanks, Vern. Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here too. And just to get started, this article that you've done for us deals with resources on Mars, and we're going to get into all of that. And one of the main ones, of course, is water, because in the article you point out that water is going to become the most valuable commodity up there. Is that true? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Those of us involved in the petroleum industry know what the value of a barrel of oil is, but if you think about space, the value of sending anything in space right now without all reusable rockets is up to $35,000 a kilogram. And that's very expensive. And if you want to ramp that up to the weight of a barrel of oil, that makes a barrel of oil in space pretty darn expensive. A valuable commodity in space is rocket fuel and water, and we can make rocket fuel from water. So that makes water in space the most valuable commodity in the solar system by far. I mentioned reusable rockets. If we have full reusability of rockets for all of our launches and getting stuff out of Earth's gravity well, we could reduce that cost to about $1,900 a kilogram. Now, where can we find water in space? You can't just suck it out of a vacuum. We do know that there's water at the poles of the moon, and we have a space directive from the current administration to get us back to the moon by 2024. And eventually we want to get to the poles and mine water and show that we can produce water and rocket fuel on the moon. Now, that doesn't get us to Mars. Mars is a very attractive place for humans because as another place in the solar system that's not all that far away by astronomical standards, it has plenty of water. Mars has about 5 million times more water than we could possibly eke out of the poles of the moon. And that water is not only at the poles of Mars, frozen in polar caps, but it's in the shallow subsurface of places on Mars like Arcadia Planitia, where I think after you dug down about a meter, you'd hit solid water ice. It's that readily available. That would make it an attractive place to land.
Well, Doug, can I interrupt you for just a second? For some of our listeners, I know not for the people who are in part of astrogeology, but how and when did we first realize that there was so much water on Mars?
Well, if I go back to when I was a kid, back when Apollo 11 landed, we didn't know anything about Mars. We had telescopic views with fleeting images where people thought they were seeing canals and imagining water on Mars. And then shortly after Apollo 11 landed in 1971, we flew Mariner 9 by Mars and got some pictures on a flyby. And oh my goodness, it looked like the moon, looked like a dry place. But some of those images were very tantalizing, showing what looked like dry riverbeds. There are a huge canyon. There's a huge canyon on Mars, much bigger than the Grand Canyon, that has outflow valleys that go to the northern hemisphere of Mars. And it looked like there was once an ocean basin there. And where did all that water go? Well,
Yeah. Where did it go?
it's in the poles and it's in the subsurface. Since those early probes, we've had orbiters orbiting Mars for almost 20 years. A good example is Mars Odyssey and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. They're sending back tremendously detailed images. And they have science packages like a gamma ray spectrometer that can map the entire planet and find out where the signature for hydrogen and thus water and water ice is. And I mentioned Arcadia Planitia, that's a glowing bullseye in that gamma ray spectrometer map. And we have detailed close-up imagery that shows what the geomorphology is of shallow surface ice.
For some of us who are not familiar with space processes and exploration like this, how does that work actually in terms of getting equipment to where it needs to go, and then the people who are going to be there? How does that whole process work? How are we going to extract all the resources that we need?
Well, we can demonstrate it on the moon, and the equipment for demonstrating extracting water on the moon is currently being developed. Like Apollo taught us, taking things to space, everything has to be smaller and more efficient. Mm-hmm. So instead of seeing huge megaton versions of mining equipment, we would see something smaller that operates over a long period of time, perhaps an auger that brings lunar regolith up that has ice crystals in with soil and goes into a hopper and processes, maybe radiating it with microwaves to extract the water and condense it. Then that water through electrolysis can be turned into hydrogen and oxygen. That's your rocket fuel. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now on Mars, again, it's going to take equipment, and it's going to take heavy lift vehicles to get that equipment there. I think the water is more readily available on Mars. We could excavate and tunnel underneath the surface, and actually, while we're extracting ice from underneath the surface, we could be making habitats for our settlers to live under the surface of Mars and get away from some of the radiation hazards.
Wow. That's all just fascinating, the potential now. Doug, can I ask you, on a personal note, when and how and why did you get so interested and excited about astrogeology?
Well, Vern, I've always been interested in astronomy. I ground my first telescope mirror, a 6-inch Newtonian reflector telescope, when I was 12 years old, to look at the moon, to look at the planets, to look at Mars, to look at the stars, and that was a pretty darn good telescope. And this was just before Apollo. Apollo really excited everyone's imagination, but unfortunately, it was such an expensive program. It came to a screeching halt after Apollo 17. and the humans going to the moon hasn't occurred for since 1972, and that was Apollo 17. I wanted to be an astronomer, but Apollo, when that dried up, so did the prospects for me being an astronomer, and I wanted a lucrative career, so that was petroleum geology, and I do not regret that for a moment. But now that I am retired, I've rekindled my passion for astronomy and astrogeology, and fortunately, AAPG does have a very avid interest in astrogeology through the Astrogeology Committee. In every ACE convention of recent memory, we've had an astrogeology session with, say, a half a dozen papers about astrogeology. And Mars is just a fascinating place for a geologist. What we have learned, the imagery from MRO is so fascinating. It's absolutely profound.
Yeah. To be precise, when the career that you went into as a petroleum geologist dealt with deep water submersible, right? That was kind of an environment very similar to what the Martian atmosphere is going to be like, or environment, I should say.
Yeah, that was a happenstance of my career in the deep water Gulf of Mexico. I'm a prospector, and trained as a geologist, a practicing geophysicist with access to geophysical data. And academia came to me and saying, we know about this oil seep down here in the area you're working. Can we get access to some of your 3D geophysical data? We'd like to study that more. And that relationship developed into the opportunity to work with the Johnson Sea Link submersibles over a period of about 10 years, studying oil seeps and the associated extremophiles, the extreme life forms that live on oil and gas at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. Quite fascinating. But yeah, going down in a submersible to 2,500 feet and having carbon dioxide scrubbers over your head, you're in a capsule with a life support system. It's kind of like going to space.
One last question for you. In terms of EMD, AAPG's division on Energy Minerals Division, this also could be something of an involvement engagement for EMD members at this time.
Oh, certainly. And the Astrogeology Committee has always had a strong relationship with EMD. In fact, we're trying to strengthen that relationship, and we'll probably be starting some interactive online discussions with them. We've mentioned the value of water in space, but certainly if you look 50 years or more down the road, with human settlements on Mars, we need energy on Mars. Extracting the water ice and the electrolysis to produce hydrogen and oxygen for fuel, that takes energy, and we're going to need nuclear power on the moon to provide that. We don't have enough solar power, so we see literally nuclear reactors, uranium type nuclear reactors, fission reactors as being the energy source. And we need big ones. NASA has ones that can produce on the order of 40 kilowatts as a demonstrator. They want to take those to the moon. We'll take them to Mars, but that's not enough to make rocket fuel. We need something on the order of a 10 megawatt reactor. Whoa. And then down the line, you're going to need more uranium for your reactor. You bring it from Earth, or you find the resources on Mars. So now we're doing hard rock geology prospecting on Mars way in the future
Yeah.
for our energy sources.
You paint a fascinating, intriguing future for us, Doug. Thank you for this article. I would remind everybody that that Doug Cook's article again is in this issue of the Explorer, Mars Resources for Human Settlement. It's something you shouldn't miss. Doug, thank you so much for being our guest today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Vern.
Well, thank you for that. And now we get to talk with Bob Merrill. Bob Merrill, of course, is the elected editor of AAPG, and as such, he has his finger on the pulse of all things geoscience that are going on. And Bob, welcome to Explorer Live. And I know that one of the things that's been on your mind lately when we talk about geoscience, we've just had a ton of geoscience presented at ACE. I know you were interested in that. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, and one of my focuses in terms of what are people interested in, and in terms of AAPG, what can we provide to our members that members want to read or see? A lot of that information can be extracted from the demographics of who attends what sessions and how many people attend each session. So I'm in the process now of putting together a matrix, if you will, of what sessions were the most attended. For instance, the discovery thinking session was attended. And out of this idea, then we can begin to focus on bulletin articles. We need to recruit some bulletin articles specifically on topics. And as well as special issues.
Well, no, it just you're being we're being very proactive. I was going to say aggressive, but we're being very proactive in going out to try to find the geoscience that is relevant, cutting edge, important for our members, right?
Right, and there are two sides to that. One is the Explorer, and the other is the Bulletin. So how can we manage this and get the information out to our membership? With the Explorer, I had the idea of, well, we've got several divisions: the energy mineral, the EMD, the DEG. We've got committees like the Astrogeology Committee, but we need to, at least as a geologist, I'm interested in reading about geology. And it's nice to have informal articles, if you will, in the Explorer that pique your interest. So how do we do that? Well, this month we've seen the Mars article, and the articles on Mars will continue. A couple of issues ago, there was one on geothermal, and this was with the help of Chandler Wilhelm, who's going to kind of manage the EMD articles on energy minerals. I'll be working with the DEG to get a series of environmental articles for the bulletin.
Yeah.
And so that's the Explorer. So now what we really need to think about, once we get the Explorer going, is how do we manage and how do we bring content to the bulletin? Well, that content is there's a lot of unsolicited content coming in. So we're getting 200 to 300 manuscripts a year submitted. But what are our members interested in? And that's where the special issues come in. We can have dedicated special issues. And currently I've got a number of special issues that are moving forward. One on carrier beds. How do the hydrocarbons migrate through the ground? We've had the super basin conferences. So now we're going to have maybe as many as 3. There's one super basin special issue that should be coming out at around the first of the year. I've solicited Mike Perch to put together one on geoscience data analytics. There's a lot of efforts going on into that, and that's where a lot of the exploration is going to be taking place, or how it's going to be taking place, in addition to standard stratigraphy, if you will, and subsurface work. We've got another special issue that'll be coming out on salt basins that we've recruited. And that goes along with the salt basins TIG that was recently formed. I've got another one signed up for, John Underhill is working with carbon capture and underground storage. So we have a special issue on CCUS. And another one that just came up is I've got a couple of authors suggest that we do one on the Wilcox. We're very close to finishing one up on the Berea sandstone. And these special issues will have 6 to 8 articles, very focused on their subjects.
Wow, wow! That you just dropped the names of great people and great subjects. Something that an APG is about the science, and that's what we're striving to get in. And you're also taking though the active role in the Explorer. That's kind of a new thing. You're enjoying that?
Well, I am enjoying that. As a matter of, to be honest, I thought it was important, and so I took it on.
Yeah. Well, we can't wait to see the results of that as we continue to go on. And Bob, we'll be talking to you again every month just to find out what it is that we should be looking for. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our cover story this month was the Mars rover Perseverance, and perseverance is a quality that all of us can use during these difficult times. Thanks for being part of the inaugural edition of Explorer Live for October 2020. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think. You can connect with us on social media, leave a comment on the Explorer webpage, or send a letter to the editor. Brian Irvin, our managing editor for the Explorer, loves to get mail. That's it for this month. We'll see you next month. For all of us here at Explorer Live, stay safe, stay connected, and keep exploring.